Oh man, you guys know a rant is coming after a clip like that. But hey, what's up Guardians, TBL here, coming back at you with a little bit of something special today. We're going to be talking a little bit about a recent, fantastic Edge magazine interview with Bungie at Gamescom. Or rather, more importantly, a certain subsection of that interview concerning the Crucible matchmaking and why Destiny multiplayer plays the way it does right now. That opening clip had a little bit of a quote in it from the magazine, and we're going to be diving into that very quickly. The match here you're seeing is just a basic game of Clash that I had earlier in the day after a stream of very sweaty and very laggy matches in both the freelance 6v6 and normal Clash game mode. But without further ado, let's dive on into this. So of course Bungie had this fantastic interview with Edge magazine. We got a lot of really great information out of it. And everyone's favorite resident Destiny madman, Mercules904 over on the subreddit, gave us a nice breakdown of all the big talking points within that interview. I'll leave a link to his breakdown in the description so you guys can go check it out for yourself. They talked about Destiny 2, Rise of Iron of course, and some of the inherent problems that Bungie had in year one, whether it was the tool set that they had, the fact that their team jumped up from a relatively small development team to a team of hundreds of people and, you know, all kinds of bureaucracy issues that come with that. It was some really interesting stuff, but there were a couple of lines in the breakdown specifically about the Crucible and skill-based matchmaking that really caught my eye, and that quote at the beginning of this video is one of them. Now, this interview was conducted between Edge and Lars Bakken, who is the Crucible lead designer, as well as Steve Cotton, who is the world lead designer for Destiny. And of course, they were asked a couple of questions about the Crucible matchmaking, and specifically skill-based matchmaking. And they answered it in a surprising sort of way to me. First off, they didn't deny that skill-based matchmaking exists, which is kind of funny considering the previous history of how skill-based matchmaking has been in Destiny and Bungie's public response to it. They used to deny that it was a thing, but they openly talk about it here, and the breakdown states that skill-based matchmaking is brought up, saying the highest level players dislike being forced to play sweaty matches all the time, especially when connections are compromised. And this is absolutely true. Go listen to any one of your favorite Crucible streamers. Go watch Triple Rec, go watch Dr. Lupo, go watch Inkuch. Any one of them will agree that the state of Crucible right now isn't too great when it comes to matchmaking. They're generally forced into lobbies that are way laggier, their wait times are way longer than everyone else, and it's just not that enjoyable of a time. We've even seen that here on my channel. Even though I'm far from being, you know, one of the best Crucible players in the world, I am in the high skill bracket, and you guys have seen what my matches are like on my main account versus what they're like on my baby account. It can get really bad, so I definitely agree with the statement that players dislike being forced to play sweaties all the time, especially when connections aren't up to par, which they absolutely are not most of the time. Lars replies that he understands people want to be able to choose when to have their skill tested, also true, and when to kick back and just have fun. But that's difficult to do because the people at the top are having fun at the expense of the people at the bottom. They don't want the bottom rank players to quit because they get destroyed all the time. And you know, that's an interesting point, and I understand it. It's absolutely true. Nobody wants to jump into the Crucible and be destroyed all the time. But here's where I start to have some fundamental differences with the philosophy that the Bungie Crucible guys have. They say they don't want the players at the top enjoying themselves and winning at the expense of the players at the bottom. But here's the thing. That's how a competitive multiplayer game works. It doesn't matter if you're a top tier bracket or a low tier bracket. If you're in a match of sweats with this top 10 players, the people winning are winning at the expense of the people losing. That's just how this works. And it's the same thing for a low skill bracket. The people winning in low skill brackets are winning at the expense of the people losing. That's what competition is. So that's a particular line that I really don't understand, especially given the way that Bungie has balanced weapons and player classes and whatnot in the Crucible. So again, in my opinion, that particular bit just fundamentally goes against the idea of the Crucible itself, of a competitive multiplayer FPS game as a whole. It just doesn't make sense to me. Now, moving on to the next statement, they don't want bottom ranked players to quit because they get destroyed all the time. Now, this is a real issue. This is something to actually worry about, because of course, lower skill players who get put up against top 10 people are gonna lose 9 times out of 10 if there's not crazy RNG and luck involved. So that's definitely a point of worry. You don't want to scare off new players to the Crucible because they're always getting demolished by the high skill players. Now, my problem with that is, that's the way every single competitive multiplayer, especially first-person shooter game, works. Sometimes you just get thrown into a match with a high skill player and you get demolished. You know, it just happens. And I would argue that it's not exactly a bad thing. My favorite example is when I first started playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. I remember the first match I jumped into on that one, which is seriously taking me back almost 10 years. I cannot believe that it's really been that long. But I remember my very first match of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. I was stepping in there, I had played some COD 4, you know, I had played previous first-person shooter games, but never really too much online. And I stepped into a match and I got demolished. My first match, they were dropping chopper gunners, AC-130s, almost got a nuke laid on me, and I was like, whoa, what is all this going on here? And certainly it happened way more times as I was moving forward in my my gameplay of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and certainly in other Call of Duty games, Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, Modern Warfare 3, shoot, even Ghost and Advanced Warfare. And yes, Destiny. In the early days of Destiny, I was not good at the Crucible at all, and I got put up against some pretty hard-hitting people from what I recall. And you know what it did? It taught me to be better. In Call of Duty, I had to learn the map. In Destiny, I had to learn my weapon class. I was running around trying to use a scout rifle completely incorrectly at the start of Destiny, and I swapped over to hand cannons and thought, okay, this feels a little bit more comfortable. I had to find my niche. I had to learn the map, learn the gameplay, and understand how to approach encounters. And that's what playing against higher skill players did for me. It taught me how to play the game, and that's what it does for literally every other first-person shooter out there. So I would argue that those newer players would want, maybe even need, that experience of just going up against an unstoppable force of a high-skill player to actually test themselves and get better at the game. If you just keep them playing other low-skilled players, they're not going to get any better. And eventually, when their stats get too high for them to be in the low skill bracket, they're going to be put up against other high skill players, and they're just going to have to learn anyway. So yeah, that's just not a philosophy that I could really identify with. And the last little quote from the magazine that I want to talk about here is from Steve Cotton. Cotton admits that right now they haven't really made it enjoyable enough for players to have fun when they're only winning half of their games. I think this implies that, for players who would normally win the majority of their games, Bungie hasn't done a good job of keeping Crucible fun when the game makes it so that you lose as much as you win. Oh man, do I have a number of problems with this statement right here. The first of which being, why is it the matchmaking algorithm's job to ensure that I'm losing half the games that I'm playing? That's what you're implying with that statement there, that you are going to force a player to lose 50% of the games that they're playing to keep their win-loss ratio completely equal. And this translates to so many of the issues that are going on in the Crucible right now. Whether it's the rebalancing of fire teams after a particularly good match, or the fact that the game can sometimes just throw you into a game that's 80% of the way done, and the enemy team, it'll put you on the losing team while the enemy team has like a 10,000 point lead. Virtually ensuring a loss there. You guys have seen it on my channel, you've seen it on other people's channels. And there's other things, you know, of course, like the connection issues that go on when the game completely ignores the locations of players it's matching or the quality of their connections and puts them together simply because they're in a similar skill bracket. These are real issues facing the Crucible right now, and they've been wreaking havoc on the player numbers for almost a year now. And this notion that you should be forced to lose half the games you play just really doesn't sit well with me. And I would say to Steve Cotton, Lars Bakken, and the entire Crucible and really Destiny team that you shouldn't be focusing on making the Crucible fun and rewarding while it's forcing you to lose. You should just focus on making the Crucible fun. If you really want to have that skill-locked element in there, make a ranked playlist. And if you want to encourage lower skill players to stay in the Crucible while they're having rough matches against higher skilled players, well, increase the reward drop rate, ensure that they get something for their time spent in the Crucible. Just focus on making the Crucible a fun and rewarding experience without trying to manipulate the win-loss rate of your players. You should win and lose based on your skill as a player and the skill of your team, not because an algorithm decided you did a little bit too good in the previous match. At least in my opinion. But alright guys, that's all I've got to rant about today. Again, this is all from an Edge magazine interview about the Rise of Iron, the history of Destiny, and where we're going to be going in the future. It's a fantastic read, and I'll leave a link to the breakdown article by Mercules904 down in the description box below. But what do you guys think about this? Do you think Bungie's right that they should have an algorithm that forcibly keeps the higher skill players away from the lower skill ones at any cost? And what do you feel about the matchmaking trying to influence win-loss rate? Be sure to let me know down in the comment section below. But alright, it's going to be it for this one, guys. Thanks so much for watching. We're now less than a month away from the Rise of Iron, and I'm still super excited about that. But alright, I'm out for now. And as always, I am the Black Link. You Guardians, stay frosty. And try not to rage in the Crucible.